The Valorian Empire had ruled the stars for 6,000 years. Their ships moved through space like great metal beasts, carrying armies that had crushed every civilization they had ever met. 200 star systems bowed before them. 1,000 conquered species served them. The Valorians believed they were the greatest power the universe had ever seen. And for 6,000 years, nothing had proven them wrong. When their deep space scouts discovered the small blue planet called Earth, they saw nothing special. The humans had only learned to travel between stars a few decades ago. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were primitive. Their entire population lived on just one world and a handful of small colonies. The Valorians had conquered species far more advanced than this. Earth would be easy. Ambassador Crickstal was chosen to deliver the message. He was a tall creature with gray scales and 4 arms, dressed in the golden robes of the Valorian diplomatic corps. He had delivered this same message to dozens of species before. Most surrendered immediately. Those who did not were destroyed. It was simple. His ship appeared in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning. Every television screen, every computer, every phone on the planet suddenly showed his face. He spoke in a cold, flat voice that the ship's computers translated into every human language at once. "People of Earth," he said, "I am Ambassador Crickstal of the Valorian Empire. Your world now falls within our territory. You will surrender all military forces. You will accept Valorian rule. You will serve the Empire as countless species have served before you. If you refuse, we will take your world by force. You have one standard rotation to respond." The transmission ended. The world held its breath. In the great capitals of Earth, leaders gathered to discuss what they had just seen. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. A few thought surrender was the only way to survive. They argued through the night while their people watched the sky with fear in their hearts. When the deadline came, the humans sent their response. It was not a long speech or a detailed negotiation. It was a single word transmitted on every frequency the Valorians were monitoring. No. Ambassador Crickstal received this message aboard his diplomatic vessel. He read it 3 times, certain there must be some mistake. No species had ever refused so simply, so directly, so completely. He forwarded the message to the War Council and requested immediate military intervention. The Valorian flagship Eternal Dominion was the largest warship ever built. It stretched 5 miles from end to end, carrying enough weapons to burn a planet down to bare rock. Fleet Admiral Vornak commanded this vessel and the 300 ships that traveled with it. He was old for a Valorian. His scales faded to a pale blue-gray, but his mind remained sharp. He had led 47 successful planetary conquests. He had never lost a battle. He had never even come close. When he received the human response, he laughed. "One word," he said to his officers. "They send us one word. These creatures have spirit. I almost admire it." He pulled up the tactical data on Earth. 2 million soldiers spread across the planet. A few hundred warships. Some nuclear weapons, though the humans seemed strangely afraid to use them. Nothing that could stand against the might of the Empire. "We will land 12 million warriors in the first wave," Vornak decided. "We will establish control within one planetary rotation. By the time their sun sets tomorrow, Earth will belong to us." His officers saluted and went to prepare the invasion. None of them doubted their admiral's words. They had done this many times before. The first wave of dropships launched 6 hours later. 10,000 Valorian shock troops descended toward a region the humans called the Pacific Northwest. It was a land of thick forests, tall mountains, and cold rivers. The Valorians chose it because it was far from any major human city. They expected to establish a secure landing zone without any real opposition. They expected the humans to be slow to respond, Staff Sergeant Danny Martinez watched the dropships come down from his position on a forested ridge. He was a short man with dark hair and calm brown eyes that had seen more than their share of violence. 14 years in the Marine Corps had taught him many things. The most important was simple. When trouble comes, you deal with it. He had 12 Marines under his command. They were a reconnaissance squad sent out 3 days ago to monitor unusual activity in the area. Now they were the only human force within 50 miles of 10,000 alien soldiers. "Command, this is Recon 7, Martinez said into his radio. "We have visual on enemy landing. Approximately 10,000 hostiles. Requesting orders." The radio crackled. "Recon 7, reinforcements are 6 hours out. You are ordered to observe and report. Do not engage." Martinez looked at his squad. They looked back at him with steady eyes. Corporal Katie Nguyen, his second-in-command, was already checking her rifle. Private First Class Ben Kowalski, barely 22 years old, had a grin on his face that seemed wildly inappropriate for the situation. "Observe and report," Martinez repeated. He thought about the alien army spreading out through the valley below. He thought about what they would do to the small towns and farms that lay in their path. He thought about his own family, living just 300 miles away. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's not going to work for me." He turned to his squad. "Here's the situation. We have 10,000 aliens between us and home. Help is 6 hours away. Command wants us to hide and watch. I'm not going to do that. These things came to our planet. They came to take our home. I say we show them what that costs." Katie Nguyen smiled. "What's the plan, Sergeant?" Martinez pointed down at the valley. "We know this ground. They don't. We're going to use every rock, every tree, every shadow. We're going to hit them and move. Hit them and move. We're going to make them afraid of what's hiding in these woods." He loaded a round into his rifle with a sharp click. 10,000 to 13. I've had worse odds. Nobody laughed. They all knew he wasn't joking. In the distance, the Valorian troops were forming up into long columns, preparing to march. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never known defeat. They had conquered worlds. They had crushed armies. They feared nothing. They had never met a United States Marine. Martinez raised his hand and gave the signal to move out. 12 Marines slipped into the shadows of the forest, silent as ghosts, moving to meet an army. The greatest military force in the galaxy had come to Earth, expecting easy prey. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The war for Earth had begun. The Valorian soldiers marched through the forest in long, neat lines. Their armor was bright silver, their weapons held high, their steps perfectly matched. They had been trained from birth to fight this way. On 100 different worlds, this formation had brought them victory. They saw no reason to change it now. Commander Drexel led the first column. He was young for an officer, eager to prove himself in what everyone expected to be an easy conquest. His soldiers numbered 800, and he had been given the honor of securing the first sector. He expected to meet no resistance at all. The forest was quiet around them. Too quiet, perhaps, but Drexel did not know enough about Earth to understand what that meant. The birds had stopped singing. The small animals had fled. Something had frightened them. But the Valorians marched on without noticing. Danny Martinez watched them from behind a fallen tree 200 yards away. He had positioned his squad in a wide arc around the narrow valley the aliens were using as their path. Every Marine had clear sight lines. Every Marine knew exactly what to do. "Wait for it," Martinez whispered into his radio. "Let them get deep into the kill zone. Nobody fires until I give the word." The Valorians kept coming. 100 yards, 75, 50. Now, 13 rifles fired at once. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder. The front of the Valorian column simply fell apart. Soldiers dropped before they even knew they were under attack. Their bright silver armor meant nothing against weapons designed to punch through steel. Drexel screamed orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. His soldiers tried to form a defensive line, but they could not see their enemy. The shots came from everywhere and nowhere. Every time a Valorian raised his head, a bullet found him. Moving, Katie Nguyen said into her radio. She fired 3 more rounds, then slipped away from her position, running low through the trees. The Valorian shot at where she had been, but she was already gone. This was the way Martinez had trained his squad to fight. Shoot, move, shoot, again from a new position. Never stay in one place long enough to be targeted. Make the enemy think you are everywhere at once. The Valorians had never seen anything like this. Their previous enemies had stood and fought in organized formations. They had lined up and died with honor. These humans refused to play by those rules. They fought like ghosts, like shadows, like the darkness itself had come alive to kill. 11 minutes after the first shot, the firing stopped. Commander Drexel lay dead with 17 bullet holes in his body. 342 of his soldiers lay around him. The rest had fled back the way they came, running from an enemy they still had not seen. Martinez gathered his squad at their fallback position. He did a quick check. Everyone was alive. Everyone was uninjured. They had just killed over 300 enemy soldiers without losing a single Marine. Ben Kowalski shook his head in disbelief. They didn't even use cover, he said. They just stood there in the open, like they were waiting to get shot. They've never needed cover before, Martinez replied. Every enemy they've fought just lined up and died for them. They don't know any other way to fight. Katie Nguyen was reloading her magazines, her fingers moving with practice speed. They'll learn, she said. Give them time, and they'll learn. Martinez nodded. Then we better kill as many as we can before that happens. Move out. We hit the next column in 20 minutes. Over the next 6 hours, Martinez's squad struck again and again. They attacked supply lines, ambushed patrols, and melted away before the Valorians could respond. They used every trick that humans had learned in 10,000 years of warfare. They set traps with fallen trees and hidden explosives. They attacked at night, when Valorian eyes could barely see. They used the rain and the fog and the darkness as weapons. Private Amy Schultz was their medic. She was 19 years old, barely out of training, but she fought as hard as any of them. During one engagement, she dragged 2 wounded Marines to safety through a hail of alien fire, then picked up a fallen rifle and killed 6 Valorians who tried to follow. When Martinez praised her afterward, she just shrugged and went back to treating wounds. Private First Class Tony Ruiz was their heavy weapons specialist. He carried an old machine gun that had belonged to his grandfather, modified to accept modern ammunition. When a Valorian squad tried to flank their position, he held them off alone for 4 minutes while the others retreated, killing 32 aliens before falling back himself. Every Marine had a story like this. Every one of them fought beyond what should have been possible. They were tired, hungry, and outnumbered 1,000 to 1. None of that seemed to matter. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the Valorians had suffered over 4,000 casualties in Martinez's sector alone. They had gained less than 3 miles of ground. The generals back on the flagship were receiving reports that made no sense to them. How could 13 soldiers cause this much damage? How could such a small force hold back an army? Martinez did not care about the confusion he was causing. He only cared about the next engagement, the next position, the next chance to make the enemy pay for every step they took on human soil. On the morning of the second day, he gathered his squad in a small cave they had found. Everyone was exhausted. Katie Nguyen had taken a plasma burn to her shoulder during a night raid, and Martinez had sealed the wound himself with a heated knife. She had not even screamed. "Command says reinforcements are still 4 hours out," Martinez told them. "The enemy is bringing in more troops. Probably another 5,000 in our sector." Ben Kowalski laughed, though there was no humor in it. "So the odds are getting better." Something like that. Martinez looked at each of his Marines in turn. "I won't lie to you. These next few hours are going to be the hardest yet. But I've seen what you can do. I've seen you stand against an army and make them run. Whatever happens today, remember that. Remember what we've done here." Katie Nguyen stood up, wincing only slightly at the pain in her shoulder. "Enough talking, Sergeant. We've got aliens to kill." Martinez smiled for the first time in 2 days. "Yes, we do. Move out." They vanished into the forest, 30 Marines against an empire. The Valorians sent 5,000 fresh soldiers into that sector. By the time the sun set again, half of them would be dead, and the survivors would speak of the humans with fear in their voices. They would call the valley where Martinez fought the throat of death. The humans had a different name for it. They called it Easy Valley. It was a joke. Nobody was laughing. Fleet Admiral Vornak had not slept in 36 hours. He stood in the command center of the Eternal Dominion, staring at the tactical display with eyes that could not believe what they were seeing. Red dots covered the map of the invasion zone. Each red dot was a dead Valorian soldier. There were thousands of them. "This has to be wrong," he said for the 5th time. "Run the numbers again." Intelligence Officer Throx worked his console with trembling fingers. He was one of the finest military analysts in the Empire, trained to study enemy tactics and find weaknesses. He had never studied anything like this before. "The numbers are correct, Admiral," he said quietly. "We have lost 9,000 soldiers in the first 40 hours. Most of them in a single sector. To a force our sensors indicate numbers less than 50 humans." Voronok turned sharply. 50? "Our initial scans showed 13, Admiral. Reinforcements may have reached them, but our best estimate is no more than 50. Perhaps fewer." The War Council had gathered around the tactical display. A dozen senior officers, each one a veteran of countless campaigns, stood in stunned silence. They had come to this meeting expecting to hear of easy victory. Instead, they were hearing something impossible. Admiral Varnak walked slowly around the display. "Show me the combat footage," he ordered. Throx hesitated. He had watched the footage many times already. Each time, it gave him nightmares. But he obeyed the order and projected the recordings onto the main screen. The council watched in silence. They saw Valorian soldiers marching through a forest, confident and organized. They saw those same soldiers fall in waves as bullets came from everywhere at once. They saw their warriors panic, break formation, run for cover that did not protect them. They saw the humans move through the trees like shadows, appearing just long enough to kill, then vanishing again. One recording showed a single human woman engaging a full platoon of 40 Valorians. She never stopped moving, never stayed in one place for more than a few seconds. She fired, rolled, ran, fired again. In 2 minutes, the platoon was destroyed. The woman disappeared into the fog without a scratch. Another recording showed a human male dragging a wounded comrade to safety with one arm while firing a pistol with the other. 3 Valorian soldiers tried to stop him. He killed all 3 without slowing down. "Enough," Voronok said. His voice was rough. "I have seen enough." Throx stopped the playback. The council remained silent. Nobody knew what to say. Senior Commander Vekjuma was the first to speak. She was the youngest member of the council, known for her aggressive tactics and quick mind. "These are not normal soldiers," she said. "They fight like nothing I have ever seen. Where did they learn this? They learned it from themselves, Thrax answered. Our research into human history reveals that they have been fighting each other for their entire existence as a species. 10,000 years of constant warfare. They have developed hundreds of different combat techniques, refined over thousands of generations. He pulled up a new display showing images from human history. Soldiers in ancient armor fighting with swords. Soldiers in green uniforms crawling through jungles. Soldiers in brown uniforms moving through ruined cities. They call what we are seeing guerrilla warfare, Thrax continued. It is a method designed for smaller forces to defeat larger ones. The humans have used it many times in their history. They are very, very good at it. Voronek studied the historical images. Other species had wars before we conquered them. None fought like this. No, Admiral. Because none of them practiced war the way humans do. For most species, war is an occasional event, something that happens rarely and ends quickly. For humans, war is constant. It is part of their culture, their history, their very nature. They have never stopped fighting. They've never stopped learning how to fight better. The Council absorbed this information. It explained much, but it made the situation no less frightening. What is the current kill ratio? Voronek asked. This was the number that mattered most in Valorian military doctrine. How many enemies did you kill for each soldier you lost? A ratio of 2 to 1 was acceptable. 3 to 1 was good. Above that was excellent. Thrax checked his data. He did not want to say the number out loud. For standard human infantry, he said slowly, the ratio is approximately 15 to 1 in their favor. For their elite units, the ones they call Marines, the ratio is much higher. How much higher? 47 to 1, Admiral. On average. The Council did not react. They could not. The number was too impossible to process. In 6,000 years of conquest, no species had ever achieved a defensive kill ratio above 3 to 1 against Valorian forces. Most fell below 1 to 1. And here these humans, these primitive newcomers to the stars, were killing 47 Valorians for every Marine they lost. That cannot be correct, Vexena said. But her voice lacked conviction. She had watched the footage. She knew it was possible. It is correct, Thrax replied. And the ratio is climbing. As the battle continues, the humans are becoming more effective, not less. They are adapting to our tactics faster than we are adapting to theirs. Voronek sat down heavily in his command chair. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt doubt. Increase the force commitment, he ordered. Send 50,000 more soldiers to the combat zone. Overwhelm them with numbers. Admiral Thrax said carefully, if the current ratios hold, 50,000 additional soldiers will result in approximately 40,000 additional casualties. At minimum. Then send 100,000. Send 500,000. We have 12 million warriors in this fleet. Eventually, the humans will run out of ammunition. Eventually, they will tire. We will bury them in bodies if we must. The Council accepted this order. It was the Valorian way. When you had superior numbers, you used them. It had always worked before. But as the officers returned to their posts, Thrax remained behind. He had one more piece of information, something he had not yet shared with the Council. Admiral, he said quietly, there is something else you should know. Voronek looked up. Our intelligence indicates that the humans have not yet fully mobilized their military. What we are facing is their initial response force. Garrison troops and rapid reaction units. Their full military strength remains uncommitted. The Admiral stared at him. What are you saying? I am saying, Admiral, that we are losing to the humans when they are not even trying. If they mobilize completely, if they bring their full strength to bear. He could not finish the sentence. Voronek understood. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Valorian Empire faced an enemy it might not be able to defeat. For the first time, the conquerors had become the prey. And somewhere in a forest on Earth, 30 Marines were teaching the galaxy what human beings were capable of. By the third day, Staff Sergeant Danny Martinez had not slept more than 2 hours total. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, some of it his own. His rifle was scratched and dented from use. His hand shook slightly when he was not holding a weapon. None of this mattered to him. The only thing that mattered was the mission. His squad had been pushed back 12 miles from their original position. The Valorians had learned, just as Katie Nguyen predicted they would. They no longer marched in neat columns. They spread out, used cover, moved more carefully. They were adapting, but they were not adapting fast enough. Every lesson cost them hundreds of dead. Every improvement came with a price paid in blood. And the Marines kept finding new ways to kill them. Tony Ruiz had figured out that Valorian plasma rifles overheated if fired continuously for more than 30 seconds. He would expose himself just long enough to draw enemy fire, count to 25, then watch as the alien weapons began to fail. That was when the rest of the squad would strike. Amy Schultz discovered that Valorian armor had a weak point at the neck joint. She spread the word, and suddenly, every Marine was making headshots with deadly accuracy. The aliens started wearing additional armor around their necks, which slowed them down and made them clumsier. Another advantage for the humans. Ben Kowalski realized that the aliens communicated using a specific radio frequency that the Marines could detect. He built a simple device that beeped whenever Valorian communications increased, warning the squad when an attack was being planned. They always knew when the enemy was coming now. These small victories added up. Each one saved lives and cost the enemy dearly. It was how humans had always fought. Not with overwhelming force, but with cleverness, adaptation, and the absolute refusal to give up. On the evening of the third day, Katie Nguyen took another wound. A plasma bolt caught her in the leg as she was covering the squad's retreat from a failed ambush. She went down hard, and 3 Valorians moved toward her, sensing an easy kill. Danny Martinez saw it happen. He did not think. He simply moved. He broke from cover and ran straight at the 3 aliens, firing as he went. The first one fell with a bullet through its skull. The second turned to face him and died before it could raise its weapon. The third managed to fire once, missing Martinez by inches, before a shot from Ben Kowalski dropped it from behind. Martinez reached Katie and grabbed her arm. "Can you walk?" "No," she said through gritted teeth. "But I can hop." He pulled her up, threw her arm over his shoulder, and half-carried her toward the trees while the rest of the squad provided covering fire. A plasma bolt burned the ground at his feet. Another singed his shoulder. He did not slow down. They made it to cover. Amy Schultz immediately went to work on Katie's leg, pulling out bandages and medical supplies. Martinez stood guard, watching the tree line for any sign of pursuit. "They're not following," Tony Ruiz reported. "I think we scared them." Martinez nodded. They had scared the aliens. A handful of Marines had scared an empire that ruled 200 star systems. It would have been funny if the situation were not so desperate. The radio crackled. Martinez grabbed it, hoping for news of reinforcements. Instead, he heard something better. "Recon 7, this is Thunder Actual. We are 4 miles from your position. Hold on. Help is coming." Thunder Actual was the call sign for Lieutenant Colonel Nick Brennan, commander of the 2nd Marine Battalion. 500 fresh Marines, supported by armored vehicles and attack helicopters. They were coming. Martinez felt something loosen in his chest. He had not realized how tense he had been until that moment. "Thunder Actual, this is Recon 7. You are the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. Brennan laughed through the radio. "Save the love letters, Sergeant. What's your status?" 12 Marines alive, 2 wounded. We are at coordinates 379er by 442. Be advised, the enemy is getting smarter. They're learning our tricks. Understood. Hold your position. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Martinez looked at his squad. 12 tired, bloody, battered Marines who had been fighting non-stop for 3 days. They had killed over 4,000 enemies. They had held a valley against an army. And now help was finally coming. "You heard the man," he said. 30 more minutes. Think you can manage that? Ben Kowalski grinned his wild grin. "Sergeant, after everything we've been through, 30 minutes is a vacation." The reinforcements arrived just as the sun was setting. Martinez watched from the ridgeline as tanks and armored vehicles rumbled through the valley, supported by Marines moving in disciplined formations. Attack helicopters swept overhead, their guns ready. Lieutenant Colonel Brennan found Martinez's squad at their position on the ridge. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked at the 13 Marines, at their wounds and their exhaustion, and then he looked at the valley behind them. "I've been reading the reports," he said. "I'm not sure I believe them." Martinez shrugged. "We did our job, sir. Your job." Brennan shook his head. "Sergeant, you and 12 Marines held off 10,000 enemy soldiers for 3 days. You killed more than 4,000 of them. You didn't do your job. You did something impossible." "Nothing impossible about it, sir. We just did what Marines do." Brennan studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Get your people to the medical station. Rest. Eat. You've earned it. What about the battle, sir?" "Leave that to us." Brennan's eyes hardened. "The enemy thinks they've been fighting the best we have. They haven't even seen us get started." Martinez led his squad toward the rear. Behind them, Lieutenant Colonel Brennan gathered his officers for a briefing. The tactical situation had changed. For 3 days, the humans had been fighting a defensive battle, trying to slow the enemy advance. That was over now. "Intelligence says the aliens are scared," Brennan told his officers. "They're hesitating. They're bunching up for protection instead of spreading out for attack. They've never been scared before. They don't know how to handle it." He pointed at the map of the valley. "We're not going to give them time to figure it out. At 0500 tomorrow morning, we attack. Full battalion assault. We hit them with everything we have, and we don't stop until they're running for their ships." One of his captains spoke up. "Sir, we're still outnumbered. They have 50,000 troops in this sector." Brennan smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Captain, those 50,000 troops just spent 3 days getting destroyed by 13 Marines. Tomorrow they're going to face 500 of us. How do you think that's going to go?" Nobody answered. They did not need to. The attack began at dawn. The humans came out of the mist like a wave. Tanks leading, infantry following, helicopters raining fire from above. The Valorians had expected another day of hunting for invisible enemies in the forest. Instead, they found an army charging straight at them. They broke in less than an hour. Easy Valley had been taken, but the war was far from over. And somewhere on an alien flagship, a war council was about to receive news that would change everything. The Battle of Easy Valley ended on the 7th day. When the last Valorian soldier finally fled the sector, the humans held complete control of the ground. The cost had been high for both sides, but for the Valorians, it had been catastrophic. Fleet Admiral Voronek received the final casualty reports in silence. He read them once, then again, then a third time. Each reading made them no less terrible. 50,000 additional troops had been sent to overwhelm the Marine battalion. They had expected to bury the humans under sheer weight of numbers, just as the Valorians had done to countless enemies before. Instead, those 50,000 soldiers had walked into a nightmare. The humans had not waited to be attacked. They had attacked first, striking at dawn with a ferocity the Valorians had never imagined. Tanks had smashed through defensive lines. Helicopters had rained death from above. And the Marines, those terrible ghost soldiers who seemed to never miss, had led the assault personally. By the time the Valorians managed to retreat, they had lost over 30,000 soldiers. The humans had lost 812. Voronek set down the report and stared at nothing. 30,000 dead. In 1 week. In one small valley. For nothing, the War Council gathered one final time. They came slowly, reluctantly, like soldiers walking to their own execution. Every officer present knew what the numbers meant. Every officer present understood the impossible truth they now faced. Intelligence Officer Throx, Voronek said quietly, "Give us the final calculation." Throx stood at the display terminal. His scales had gone pale, almost white. He had spent the last 6 hours running the numbers again and again, hoping to find an error. There was no error. Across all combat operations during the 7-day incursion, he began, his voice barely steady. The average kill ratio for a single United States Marine was 63-1. The Council did not react. The number was too large to process. 63 Valorians dead for every single Marine killed. It was beyond anything in their military history. It was beyond anything in any military history they knew of. But Throx was not finished. For human special operations forces, he continued, the ratio exceeded 100-1. In some engagements, it went much higher. He paused, gathering his courage for what came next. Staff Sergeant Danny Martinez's squad, specifically, achieved a documented ratio of 347-1. Now the Council reacted. Officers shouted in disbelief. Others sat in stunned silence. A few looked as though they might be sick. 347-1. One small squad of 13 Marines had killed over 4,000 Valorian soldiers, while losing only 12 of their own. "That's not possible," Senior Commander Vexna said. "Nothing in the universe is capable of that." "The footage confirms it," Throx replied. "Every death is documented. The humans are very thorough about such things." Admiral Varak raised his hand for silence. The Council obeyed, though the horror remained on their faces. "What else?" Voronek asked. He knew there was more. There was always more. Throx brought up a new display. It showed Earth rotating slowly, surrounded by data points and analysis markers. "Our analysis indicates that the humans were fighting at minimal capacity," he said. They had not yet mobilized their full military. They had not deployed their nuclear arsenal. They had not activated their orbital defense platforms. They had not used their automated weapon systems or their long-range missiles. He let that sink in before continuing. "What we faced was their initial response force. Garrison troops, rapid reaction units, the soldiers who happened to be nearby when we landed. Their full military strength was never committed to this battle." The silence stretched on. Every officer understood what this meant. They had sent 12 million soldiers to conquer Earth. Those 12 million had faced less than 50,000 humans and had been driven back in disgrace. If the humans had used their full strength, if they had truly committed to the defense of their world, they were holding back, Vexna said slowly. They were barely trying, and they still destroyed us. "Yes," Throx confirmed. "Our projections indicate that if we had continued the invasion, the humans would have eventually deployed their full military capability. At that point, our losses would have become total." Admiral Voronek stood and walked to the viewing window. Through the thick glass, he could see Earth hanging in space, blue and green and beautiful. Such a small world. such an ordinary-looking planet. And yet it held a species that had just humiliated the greatest military power in the galaxy. "They told us no," he said softly. "When we demanded their surrender, they sent us one word: no." He turned to face his council. "We should have listened." The decision was made within the hour. The Valorian Empire formally requested peace negotiations with Earth. It was the first time in 6,000 years that they had retreated from a conquest. It was the first time they had ever asked a conquered species for peace instead of demanding surrender. The humans accepted. They were gracious in victory, which somehow made it worse. They did not gloat or make demands. They simply asked that the Valorians leave their space and never return. The Empire agreed. As the fleet prepared to withdraw, one final report reached Admiral Voronuk. It concerned Staff Sergeant Danny Martinez, the Marine who had become a legend among both humans and Valorians. The Admiral read it with something that might have been curiosity. Martinez had received a medal for his actions. He had been promoted to Master Sergeant. He had been offered positions of great honor in the human military. He had refused them all. Instead, he had taken a 3-day leave. He had traveled to a place called Montana and spent those 3 days fishing with his father. According to the report, he had barely spoken about the battle at all. When other humans asked him about Easy Valley, about the impossible things he had done, he always gave the same answer: "We did our job. That's all." Voronuk set down the report. He thought about his own career, about the medals he had received, about the honors that had been given to him. He thought about how he had always accepted them with pride, how he had believed he deserved them. And then he thought about a human soldier who had killed 347 enemies for every one of his own lost, who had held a valley against an army, who had become a legend across the galaxy, and who thought of it all as simply doing his job. Perhaps, Voronuk thought, that was the difference. Perhaps that was why the humans had won. They did not fight for glory or honor or conquest. They fought because it was what needed to be done. They fought because it was their job, and they did their job very, very well. The Valorian fleet left Earth's orbit on the 8th day. They did not look back. In the centuries that followed, the Empire would grow cautious about expansion. They would study humans carefully from a safe distance. They would tell stories about the small blue planet that had humbled them. And whenever young, Valorians asked why the Empire no longer conquered new worlds, their elders would tell them about Easy Valley, about 30 Marines who had held against an army, about a kill ratio so impossible that it should not exist, about the day the greatest military power in the galaxy learned to fear a species called humanity. On Earth, life went on. Danny Martinez returned to duty after his leave. He trained new Marines, led more missions, lived a quiet and modest life. He never thought of himself as a legend. He never understood why people treated him differently. He was just a Marine. He had done his job. That was all. And it had been enough.